The president has spoken. The GOP has answered. Now we're awash in the reaction, ranging from how the president will be able to survive all this one-hand backslapping, and those on the right calling for their newest star to be deported for her comments. While we're on the subject of contrasting points of view, the president, of course, will still ballyhoo his Iran nuclear deal, even while that government detains American sailors. So let's do the toss-up. How big a deal was this really? The Tea Party, once all the rage and a big deal when we were talking about where the next president might emerge from, but they've been quiet for some time. So who's the Tea Party darling at the moment, and are they still relevant? Speaking of a big deal, I went to Facebook telling people what I will do with that Powerball money that I'm going to take home tonight. And I asked readers why I should put some of it in their pocket, and the answers are priceless. So put away your tickets, they're no good. Maybe after this I'll toss a party. Well, BYOB, of course. Rock on for this edition of The Hardline, Wednesday, January the 13th.
The United States of America is the most powerful nation on earth. Period. Period. It's not even close. It's not even close. We spend more on our military than the next 8 nations combined.
News landed with a thud hours before the president took the podium for his State of the Union. 2 American military vessels seized by the Iranian government and 10 sailors detained, with the knee-jerks immediately going to an act of aggression against America. But the light of 24 hours later forces us to back up and ask some serious questions before getting out the nuclear codes, as in whether this is something to jot down as we still have this somewhat unbalanced government preparing to get filthy rich, and whether anybody still believes they want to be part of the world and stop seeking to kill anybody who doesn't wear their colors. Let's begin with the adjunct fellow at the Hudson Institute, former intelligence advisor to General David Petraeus, and executive director of Veterans Against the Deal, Michael Pregent, joined by former U.S. Army Special Forces current military advisor for Concerned Veterans for America, Lieutenant Colonel Scott Mann, I need to say. Gentlemen, I want to thank you both for joining us. Let's get right to this. And Lieutenant Colonel, let me begin with you. There's 2 issues I think we have to discuss here and break this down. First of all, the actual event itself. Fair to say there's still a lot of things we don't know. You can't know everything in 24 hours. And it does appear to be nothing more than a simple accident. Yes?
Well, the facts are rolling in, and I'm always, I've learned in combat, the first report is always wrong, Ed, and thanks for having me. So it's always better to let the facts bear out. But I got to tell you, as I've watched the government's response, the Obama administration's response on this, it almost feels like I'm in the twilight zone as I watch this. When 10 sailors are rolled up by a government like Iran, and the responses that we've given, and almost grateful for them being returned. In my entire professional career, I have never seen anything like that. I'm almost speechless.
Okay, let me stop you there for a second again. I'm going to play devil's advocate a little bit on this. Politically speaking, again, we'll get to the military in a moment here, but politically speaking, isn't that what you would expect just about any administration to do so as not to ratchet something up?
No. I mean, I'm a soldier, and I've served my whole life as a soldier, and if our men and women are out doing our country's work, and they're detained by another country, then I expect my leadership to stand up and start working our release, not those kinds of just equivocating statements that I've heard in the last 24 hours. Maybe I'm just too old school on this one, Ed, but I just, something's wrong with this.
Okay, now I'm going to go with you, and I pretty much go to the old school myself a lot of times when these come up. Michael, let me get to you on this as well. There are those saying, okay, wait, if indeed Iranian gunships were within American territorial waters, we would do the same thing up to a point, and I'm going to get to that second point here to break this into in just a moment here, where it becomes a little bit more egregious. But if we had military vessels in our waters, would we not do the same things, stop, take them off the boat, and at least try to find out what went on? Yes?
Thanks for having me, Ed. What we would do is we have an escalation of force, or a warning escalation. We would basically warn the vessel that it was in international or in U.S. territorial waters. At that point, if they did not turn around, there'd be an escalation of, not necessarily force, but an escalation of warning, what we do to warn Iran.
So we would not seize immediately. That's the difference here.
We would gauge the situation. If these 2 boats were actually broke down, what we would do is we would assist them and then escort them back into international waters once their Navy was there to help them. You also have to remember, traversing thousands of miles to do this in the U.S. is much different than a U.S. presence that's already in the Gulf, operating in an area that is very, very narrow. This is easier to have happen there than it is for Iranian vessels to be caught in U.S. territorial waters.
No, that's an excellent point. And also, the United States is not an aggressive nation, much like Iran is at the same time. Let me bring in Secretary of State John Kerry's comments on this, where he thanked, and this has got a lot of people bristled, thanking Iran for their cooperation after they released the soldiers. Here's what he said.
I also want to thank the Iranian authorities for their cooperation and quick response. These are always situations which, as everybody here knows, have an ability, if not properly guided, to get out of control. And I'm appreciative for the quick and appropriate response of the Iranian authorities.
All right, now, Michael, here's the second part of this, and this is what I believe is sticking in a lot of people's craws, mine and so many others as well. The Iranian government releases video of these sailors and also still pictures of the sailors on the deck of a ship on their knees with their hands over their heads. That is a blatant violation of the Geneva Convention because they are using this for nothing more than propaganda purposes. So, Michael, doesn't this tell us at the end, while the Iranians, the administration may say, hey, thank you very much, but in the end, this is still an aggressive nation that is looking to use America, this administration, and this country for nothing more than propaganda purposes?
The IRGC actually sent the video of the boarding of the U.S. ships to patriotic music. It was a propaganda event for the IRGC. It's a clear violation of the Geneva Convention. But what's more troubling is this apology forced on this young officer in charge of this crew to apologize for actually entering Iranian territorial waters. And again, we don't know what happened yet. But for the U.S. to thank Iran for capturing our guys, putting them on their knees, putting their hands behind their heads, taking photos of them, and then releasing them to thank them for that is unheard of. There should have been a strong rebuke. There should be a strong rebuke now that we're seeing those photos in that video, that Iran is using this as a propaganda event. And I would love to see our new friends be thanked for releasing Ali, Saeed, and Amir, and other U.S., other Americans that are being illegally detained by Iran.
Lieutenant Colonel Mann, new friends, the words that Michael just used here. After seeing this video and after looking at this, what we know now as the whole, do we not have to then come back and say, when the president in the State of the Union address talked about how good things are, talked about how the Iranians are getting closer, talked about the fact that they're coming into the League of Nations, does this not prove to us, again, beyond the shadow of a doubt, this is not a nation that wants to get involved with the world. They want to be an aggressor nation. They still hate the Americans, and we still can't trust them.
You know, our new friends are fomenting instability in Iraq with the Shia-based government there. They are supporting Assad. They are stirring things up in Yemen. I mean, it's amazing to me that this is going on, and yet we are thanking them, like Michael said, for capturing our guys. And you know, the only thing worse than Kerry's comment was Madam Pelosi's comment, which, you know, is just unbelievably apologetic and equivocating. And I tell you, the lack of leadership that we're demonstrating in the Middle East, we're going to reap it in spades if we don't saddle up and start getting it together over there.
An interesting comment in Bloomberg, and I wanted to get both of you to comment on this with about 60 seconds we have left. The headline is, Iran holds Obama's foreign policy legacy hostage. Lieutenant Colonel Mann, still I stick with you. Is that not the bigger issue here that people need to understand? The president needs this. He wants this. The State of the Union proved that he is all about legacy at this point, not necessarily about the state of this country. This is about him before the nation.
It is, and I talk about this in my book, Game Changers. We cannot take our eye off the fact. Every president worries about legacy, but if we don't consider the impact of legacy in the context of ISIS and Iran and this president, we're really putting ourselves at risk. I hope voters will consider that in 2016.
Michael, the same thing comes to you, but let me take it from an even harder tack. How insulted are you by the leader of this country is basically taking this kind of tech and still fawning over a country that is willing to use us for propaganda at the drop of a hat.
What's insulting is the politicization of intelligence information and the downplaying of threats to America. Iran is still the #1 exporter of terrorism, and all of our adversaries, based on these weak responses from this administration, know they can do whatever they want over the next 12 months because nothing's going to happen.
We have got to learn sooner or later that a hater is a hater, and a country that wants to kill us is not going to just stop simply because we may be giving them billions that they can use to continue the terrorist activities that they're involved in. Michael Pregent, Lieutenant Colonel Scott Mann, thank you so much for joining us. We do appreciate it. Let me ask you now to go ahead and get back to us on social media and tell us what you think about this in light of what we have discussed here, and specifically the propaganda used by the Iranian government of these sailors. Despicable. Stay with us. The fastest 60 minutes of news, The Hardline, continues.